Right now, you're doing something completely normal. Maybe you're holding a glass of beer. Maybe you're already drunk. Or maybe you're just thinking about having a drink. But what if that simple act is older than human civilization itself? Not by a few thousand years, by millions of years. And the strange part is this. It doesn't start in modern cities. It doesn't start in ancient culture. It doesn't even start with human beings. It starts in nature, long before anything we recognize as us existed. Fermentation doesn't need intelligence. It doesn't need planning. It just happens. Fruit falls to the forest floor, wild yeast reacts, natural sugar breaks down, and alcohol appears, naturally, silently, without permission. But here's where it gets interesting. Because nature didn't ignore it. Animals noticed. Birds getting disoriented after eating fermented berries. Elephants stumbling after consuming overripe food. Monkeys actively searching for it. Why would evolution allow that behavior? Because we weren't the first to interact with it. We inherited a system that already existed. But inherited what exactly? Go back 10 million years. Our primate ancestors lived in trees, constantly eating fruit. But here's the hidden detail most people miss. Ripe fruit naturally produces tiny traces of ethanol, which means they were constantly exposed to it. Every single day, without knowing why. And that exposure changed something deeper in our biology. In 2014, a biologist at UC Berkeley named Robert Dudley published a book called The Drunken Monkey. His argument was simple. The smell of ethanol wasn't just noise, it was information. It meant calories are here. Energy is here. Survival is here. So the primates, who could detect it better, survived more. And over millions of years, that survival instinct turned into our biology. But here's the unsettling part. That ancient system is still inside you. Right now. Humans can detect ethanol at extremely low levels. Far lower than most smells. But ask yourself, why would evolution keep that trait? Because for most of history, it mattered, but recognizing it is not the same as controlling it. So when did human control begin? The first real evidence doesn't come from a grand civilization. It comes from a dark cave. Rockafet Cave near modern-day Haifa, Israel, 13,000 years ago. Archaeologists found stone mortars carved directly into the bedrock, and inside them, traces of fermented grain, beer, brewed in a cave, 13,000 years ago, and here's what makes it strange. These people were the Natufians. They weren't farmers, they had no agriculture system, no permanent cities, no structured food production. They were nomads, and yet they were brewing alcohol on purpose, which completely breaks the timeline we expect. We always assume the story goes like this. First farming, then civilization, then alcohol. But here, the order collapses. Alcohol appears before stability, before systems, before everything we associate with civilization. And then, 1,000 years later, something even bigger appears. Göbekli Tepe, southern Turkey, 11,500 years old. Massive stone pillars, some weighing over 10 tons, arranged in careful circles and carved with precision, built by hunter-gatherers, before farming, before pottery. And still, it exists. Which raises the real question. What forces nomadic people to organize the massive labor needed to build this? Inside the site, researchers found large stone vats and chemical traces of fermented grain. So now imagine this. Strangers arriving from across the region after days of travel. Fire everywhere in the dark. Massive stone monuments towering above them. And then someone hands them a drink, and something shifts. Not loudly, not dramatically, but socially. Tension drops. Distance shrinks. Trust forms faster. And maybe that was the real mechanism of human history. Not architecture, not agriculture, but gathering itself. An archaeobotanist named Patrick McGovern has spent decades pushing a controversial idea. What if farming didn't start because we wanted food? What if it started because we wanted beer? At first it sounds wrong, but then you compare it. Bread is difficult. It requires grinding, kneading, and precise baking. One mistake destroys everything. Fermentation is simpler. You soak grain in water, leave it alone, and it happens by itself. So early humans discovered brewing before baking. And not because they planned it, but because it was easier to find. And once human gatherings started to depend on grain, everything changed. Like, you couldn't rely on wild grain anymore. You needed consistency. And the desire for consistency created farming, slowly, without anyone deciding it. By 7000 BCE in Jiahu, China, we see something different again. Pottery jars containing a precise blend of rice, honey, grapes, and hawthorn berries. This is no longer an accident. This is a recipe. This is engineering. By the time ancient Egypt came around, it's no longer just a drink. It's infrastructure. Workers building the pyramids were paid in beer, about 4 to 5 liters every single day. Not a reward. Their actual wages. And honestly, if you were dragging 10-ton limestone blocks in the blistering desert heat, and someone offered you a choice between a bag of metal coins or 5 liters of cold beer, what are you picking? Yeah, same. Because that beer actually kept them alive. The Nile water was often contaminated and unsafe to drink straight. But beer, because of the brewing process, was clean. Plus, it fed them. It was thick, packed with calories and nutrients. Liquid bread. One single substance doing multiple roles at once: food, water, wage, medicine, ritual. Look at the full picture now. 10 million years ago, your ancestors reached for fermented fruit to survive. 13,000 years ago, they were brewing in caves before they knew how to farm. 11,500 years ago, they built the first monuments on Earth just to have a place to drink together. 5,000 years ago, entire empires were running on it. Alcohol didn't come after we built the world. There's a real possibility it's the reason we built it at all. Think about a night out with people today. A table, a room, a kitchen, someone pours a drink, and the atmosphere changes. Not dramatically, but noticeably. People open up, conversation flows, silence disappears, and that feeling didn't start with you. Everything else changed. Cities rose and fell, languages disappeared, empires collapsed, but that small shift between humans stayed exactly the same. Every time you raise a glass, you are continuing a loop that started before our species even had a name. Different worlds, same impulse. We didn't invent it, we just learned how to follow it.